Now I want to talk about a game from my childhood, and that is Clock Tower 3. Now this is a game I have very fond memories of because it's a very wacky survival horror game that leans in heavily on the wackiness. Now Clock Tower 3 isn't your typical survival horror game. The whole franchise has always been different, with it being a series that has stalker enemies and you're running away and hiding. But Clock Tower 3 takes a different approach in the series, with it being the first time you can control the character along with having multiple stalker enemies. This game adds a lot of new elements for the franchise, but sadly Clock Tower 3 was the last game in the series because of how badly it sold. But we did get Hunting Ground, which is the spiritual successor that did take a lot of the elements from this game and improved on it. Clock Tower 3 holds a very special place in my heart, so let's talk about Clock Tower 3 and all its wackiness. Now the first thing I have to say before we get into the story and some of the other points of this game is the final boss sucks. This game has one of the worst final bosses I've ever played in my whole life because it's so goddamn annoying. I'll go over it later because I like 95% of this game, but that final boss is so goddamn trash. Like, I hate it. It's ass. Like, the final boss sucks so bad, but we'll go over that when I talk about the final boss in that section, because I can go on a whole hour rant right now and that would, you know, be wasting time. But yeah, let's talk about Clock Tower 3 though, but just know that final boss sucks. So if you've been thinking about playing this game, just know 95% of this game is good, but that final boss sucks and is ass. The story of Clock Tower 3 is a very wacky story that starts off as a normal horror story that turns into a grandfather wanting to become one with his granddaughter by killing her. Now you gotta be wondering, how do we get there? So this game starts off with Alyssa getting a letter from her mom telling her to go into hiding and stay away from home until her 15th birthday goes by. Alyssa gets a phone call from her mother, but nobody's on the other end when she gets to the phone. Fearing that something has happened, she rushes home and disobeys her mom's warning. Once she arrives home, she sees that her house is empty, and that's when she runs into an old man in black. He tells her that her mom is gone and she's never coming back. Alyssa goes inside her room, and then once she leaves her room, the fireplace that had fire randomly just goes out, and that's when it's revealed that there's a hidden room in the fireplace. And once entering, there's a statue that starts bleeding from its eye, and that's when it drops to the floor, revealing that there's a bottle inside it with a letter, and the letter explains that this bottle holds holy water. After getting the holy water, she goes to the door that had the blue seal on it, and she uses the holy water on it, and she's able to go into her mom's room. She goes to her mom's room and she picks up a glowing item. The item sends her all the way back to London in 1942, and in this place she discovers spirits and helps these spirits pass away as she brings them items. But once she goes into the tailor shop, that's when she discovers a terrifying scene of a big man with a hammer killing a little girl, and he starts chasing after Alyssa. But once she loses Sledgehammer, she starts to investigate what happened here as she finds items and notes telling her what happened. And as she does that, she avoids Sledgehammer as he tries to capture her or take her out. And once she finds the item to set the little girl free, and she has to confront Sledgehammer, and that's when her holy water bottle turns into a bow and she uses it to defeat Sledgehammer. After that, she goes back into the theater and she hands the item to the little girl, and the little girl is able to pass away peacefully with her father. Once she returns home, she finds her childhood friend Dennis, who gives her a key that unlocks her grandfather's room. Once she's inside his room, she finds a book called the Book of Entities that talks about how the entities take control of people and use subordinates to do their killing so they can acquire more power. It also talks about the people who can stop the entities are called rooters, who are always young girls. After solving a puzzle in her mom's room and using the holy water on a portal, she goes back to London 1963. Once there, she finds other spirits that are suffering. After helping them out, she goes back to the fountain to refill her holy water, and that's when she runs into her mom, and her mom drops a key. She takes the portal back to her house and she goes to her grandfather's room again to unlock a drawer, and inside she finds the Book of Entities 2 and a letter from her grandfather that we learn that the Hamilton clan are rooters, and we also find out that her grandfather is obsessed with learning about entities. After that, she heads back to London 1963. That's when she runs into the subordinate named Corroder. After doing puzzles and fighting items, Alyssa finally has to confront Corroder and beats him, and she also gives the item to the old lady and man so they can pass away peacefully. And after saving the spirit, she is sent back to London 1982. Once entering the sewers, she runs into another subordinate named Chopper. After evading him, Alyssa looks for a way to get out of the sewers. Once she gets out of the sewers, she arrives at her house, but something's different as she hears a cry of a baby. Once she heads downstairs, she finds her mom with her as a baby. Her mom is telling baby Alyssa about how important the necklace is. That's when Alyssa hears her father and grandfather arguing, and that's when her grandfather pushes her father off the ledge, killing him. Then Chopper shows up and Alyssa has a fight with him. After beating him, she arrives at a graveyard. She finds her grandfather's second note where he admits to killing her father and explains why he killed him, since her father didn't want to raise Alyssa as a rooter. Alyssa hears voices and discovers that it's the spirits of past rooters who want to be set free, and they tell Alyssa about about the ritual of engagement, which is when a rooter's heart is taken and given to the entity. This is where Alyssa goes to two different portals, one where she sets spirits free so she can get the Sunstone, another portal where Chopper's at and she has to evade him as she solves puzzles so she can get the Moonstone. After getting both of the stones, she has a boss fight with Chopper, beating him for good. After that, the rooter spirits are set free and she even sees her mom until the man in black takes her away. She meets back up with Dennis and they walk through the city. That's when Dennis sees his sister and he runs into the hospital to give her a hug, but that's when it turns out his sister is actually the Scissor Woman, and that's when the two new subordinates are introduced, Scissor Man and Scissor Woman. Once they take Dennis away, Alyssa does her usual where she frees spirits and evades both of the subordinates. The only difference is in the hospital there's a mirrored ward where Alyssa can go into a mirror so she can find other items. Once getting all the keys, she takes a portal that takes her outside the castle. There she sees the man in black. She also finds her grandfather's third note, which it talks about how Alyssa is growing up and getting close to adulthood and how he doesn't want to leave her and how he wants to be one with her. And he also discovered the ritual of engagement and he talks about how he's disgusted by it, but also part of him wants to do it. And lastly, he discovered a person named Lord Boros who has a connection to this ritual. Once inside the castle, Alyssa does her usual of finding items, solving puzzle as she evades the subordinates. She finds her grandfather's fourth note and he explains that he is going to perform the ritual of engagement. After putting the N and A crest in the right places, she unlocks a new area where she learns about Lord Boros, who was going to do the ritual, but his daughter died before her 15th birthday, so he killed his wife and went on a killing spree. And when he died, he vowed to be a hater and kill as long as the clock tower is standing. Alyssa finds her grandfather's fifth note, and in that note, her grandfather talks about how her dad was related to Lord Boros' son. And after reading that, she sees that the Scissor siblings are torturing Dennis and she races to save them. After arriving down there, Alyssa falls through the floor. She goes back to the room she was already at and she sees that her grandfather is talking to the portrait, saying it's time to bring back Lord Boros. That's when her grandfather melts into this goo, and after seeing that, she heads back to save Dennis. She first fights Scissor Woman, beats her, and her brother gets upset and Alyssa fights and beats him. Alyssa follows the dark man up the top of the clock tower. Lord Boros goes to sacrifice her, but she escapes and Dennis gives her the last piece of her clover necklace. Now it's time for Alyssa to fight Lord Boros. After a very tough fight, she beats him, but she loses her bow. After running to her mom's head, she unleashes a green glowing sword to finally kill her grandfather and Lord Boros. After defeating him, her mom's spirit comes back and she hugs her and the tower starts to crumble. The game ends with Alyssa and Dennis hugging as Alyssa says, "We did it, Mom." Now, when it comes to the story of Clock Tower, the way I really feel about this story is that it has a lot of interesting plots. Like, I think the ritual is very interesting, the subordinates, the entity, even Alyssa being a rooter. I think all that's interesting because it adds all this different lore to this game. So that's one of the things I really do like about this game. But there is one plot of this game that is very ridiculous, and that is Alyssa's grandfather being so obsessed with Alyssa, who's a little girl. But at the same time, it does add to the horror aspect of having this family member that's super obsessed with their family member, especially one that's a young girl. So I guess it does add that type of horror aspect to it. But at the same time, I'm just like, dog, what is this anime shit right here? Because if you know, so many goddamn anime will have a damn plot like that where you have some type of family member and, you know, the incest, blah blah blah, all that BS. But yeah, this game just shows like how obsessed her grandfather is, especially because her grandfather is willing to kill her just so that he can live longer. But at the same time, he's also talking about like, oh, Alyssa's growing to an adult, she's never going to be my Alyssa anymore. And I'm just like, dog, you crazy ass old man. So yeah, that's one of the things that just kind of like trippy when it comes to the story, that part. But for the most part, this game is very wacky because there's so many cutscenes in this game that just show like how wacky this game is, especially because like after the first boss, you just got done killing like the sledgehammer, but next thing you know, you're with Dennis and they're over here just playing around like everything's okay. And there's multiple times in this game where there's so many just silly cutscenes, so you never really take this game that seriously, especially when it comes to the story, because there's so many just wild funny moments in here. Like, because it's just like, dog, Alyssa for the most part does not even care about the situation she's in at some aspects of it, I'll say. But yeah, there's a lot of crazy and just wacky stuff in this game that just shows how silly this game is, and that's what really makes this game really charming, because it's a survival horror game, but at the same time it's just very charming and very silly, and you can just like play the game and you can laugh at a lot of different things. And don't get me started on the voice acting. The voice acting is very funny, I will say that too though. But yeah, that's really how I feel about the story. I do enjoy the story, but there's some plot points that are just, you know, very out there, because there's a lot of just anime and Looney Tunes shit in this game, I will say that though. Now, when it comes to Alyssa as a character, I do enjoy her character because one, she's thrown into this crazy situation where she finds out she's a rooter, and then she finds out this crazy connection that her grandfather is basically trying to kill her, and she does take light of this situation because it's a very crazy situation that she's put into, because one, you have all these people that are chasing after her, and then you find out the whole plot about her grandfather. So as a character, I like the situation she gets to because she does handle it well, and you know, you get to see her be a badass when she gets her bow and she does her little like magical girl-ish transformation when she shoots the arrow into the sky, because she defeats all these murderers that she has to face each time. Yes, there are a lot of silly moments in this game, trust me, there's a lot of them, but for the most part it makes sense for this game because of the situations she's in, and plus she's a teenage girl, so it makes sense that you'd have all these different silly moments that she's in because it's a very difficult situation. But I do enjoy her character for the most part in this game. I do enjoy just like some of her commentary. The one thing I do wish that we did get is like when she clicks on random object, we would actually get more details, similar to like how they do in Resident Evil and like Silent Hill, how you sometimes get like more dialogue when you click on certain items, where in this one you really don't get that much dialogue when she clicks on certain items. I will say that though, but for the most part I do enjoy her character. Now I want to talk about the subordinates or the stalker enemies because I think they're all fascinating. The first one you have is Sledgehammer. I think his design is pretty cool because like he's very like creepy and menacing, especially for like a first enemy that you run into in the game. I think that he's very creepy when it comes to the first subordinate. I will say, like, when he's calling Alyssa's name, out of all the other enemies, he sounds very crazy. This man sounds like he's insane when he's like, Alyssa. That actually does sound very scary. And also he uses a sledgehammer, and like that's a crazy weapon for a killer to be running around with, especially because he be having jets. I'm like, how is he catching up to Alyssa with that heavy ass sledgehammer? So yeah, I do like his character a lot. Now the next one is Corroder. Now when it comes to him, Corroder to me is just like a joke most of the time, because even the stuff that you get him with, like when it comes to like the certain like hiding places and stuff like that and evade points, a lot of his stuff is just, to me, is just played as a joke. And then you have the one where you basically slam the door on him, and that is some super duper Looney Tune ass shit. So like when it comes to his character, for the most part I just think of him as a joke, because most of the time he's not really that serious, and plus when you use the holy water on him, he basically burns too. So his character for the most part, it's okay. I think it's an interesting design because one, he's using acid, and like he's very insane because he was basically putting people in acid and basically dissolving all their bodies. Yeah, his character, just like his lore and all that, is very crazy, but him as a character, he's okay. I do like his design though. Now when it comes to Chopper, I actually do like his design a lot because one, he's a crazy Axeman that has like, you know, white paint and all this other type of stuff on him. He looks very crazy. Now he's a stalker enemy that looks insane, but I do like his design a lot. I enjoy his character like when it comes to his design. I do think there are times in this game where he's so goddamn annoying because he's pretty fast and he can catch up to you and he can hit you with the like the two axes and all that, and also he can throw one at you. So there's times like that where I don't like his character, but it's just like simply by design and like how he acts throughout the game, I do like Chopper a lot. Now when it comes to the last two, of course, with this being Clock Tower, you know you gotta have some type of scissor person in here because you know they've always had that throughout the series. But in this one we get two people. We get Scissor Man and Scissor Woman, or Ralph and Jemima. I think her name's that, whatever, I digress, but it don't matter. But yes, when it comes to those two, I love their design. Like it's very, very good. I like design. And also when it comes to the Scissor Woman, just saying, when I was younger, hey, she was a baddie and she's still a baddie now. I was like, hey, take me away. Hey, you can chop me up. But nah, I really do like their design a lot, especially because like they're kind of like a jester. They kind of have like the jester type of like design, along with them having like their cool long swords, where they're kind of like the scissor swords, kind of remind you of like Shorty from Kill la Kill, because like her scissor sword. So that's kind of what their design kind of reminds me of, if you think about it in a way. I really like their design a lot, and I do like the way they act throughout the game too, because they are super fast on you, and sometimes they can be annoying. But I do like the cutscenes with both of them in there because they're both pretty funny, especially that cutscene when they basically play Dennis. When you have the Scissor Woman, she basically is hugging Dennis and then they just play with him. So yeah, there's a lot of things there that I do like them. I do enjoy their characters throughout the game though. Now I will say is I do enjoy the boss fights a lot in this game because we finally get to fight back against these characters that have been chasing us the whole game, so I like that. And also we do get a funny little magical girl cutscene ish, especially like when the bottles transform and you shoot the arrow into the sky, so I do love that. And the boss fights with the subordinates, they aren't that difficult majority of the time. Yeah, because most of them are pretty easy, but there are some where there can be some difficulties in certain ones, and we'll talk about those. But for the most part, the boss fights are actually pretty easy, besides that stupid ass last one was, you know, the final boss. But when it comes to the subordinates, the boss fights are actually pretty easy, and they're pretty self-explanatory, especially because there's a lot of areas where you can cheese the subordinates pretty easily and just like unleash full power arrows on them. Now when it comes to the Sledgehammer's boss fight, his boss fight is very easy because he has a lot of animations where you can just like charge a full power arrow and get him stuck, especially the one when he swings the sledgehammer on the ground. You can literally just charge multiple arrows and take him out so goddamn easily because he's super easy to beat. So him for a first boss fight, it helps you out because you can get to learn this game and how these boss fights are going to be. So that's why I enjoy his boss fight a lot, just because it teaches you like kind of what you need to do in each boss fight, and it's a pretty easy boss fight. Now when it comes to the Corroder, his boss fight is one of them ones that's in the middle because it can be hard, but at the same time it's pretty easy, especially if you know what you're doing, because he does have a lot of attacks that can be annoying, because he has the one where he can spray the acid and he has one where he launches acid. But the thing with him is, if you can get him him stuck in like a certain corner, you can shoot through like the metal like area that's in the middle, and you basically will be safe because you can shoot through that, and like the boss fight becomes super duper easy once you do that. But at the same time, his boss fight can be very annoying, especially if you're playing on like the second run, and I think that's technically quote unquote the hard mode because he actually runs a little bit faster. But for the most part, if you can get him stuck right there, his is pretty easy though. Now when it comes to Chopper, the thing about Chopper is his boss fight is pretty easy the first round. His first boss fight is pretty easy. When you're fighting in that backyard, it's pretty easy to get him stuck because he has a certain attack that you can dodge that he tries to charge up, and you can get him stuck and then take him out. But it's his second boss fight that I will say is kind of hard-ish, mainly because he runs so goddamn fast in that second boss fight. For the most part, in that second boss fight, it's pretty hard to get like a full power arrow on him sometimes to get him stuck, but there are animations that he does essentially make. There's like certain ones that you can, like I think it's like when he's running at you a little bit, you can get him, but for the most part, that one can be very hard because even in my recent playthrough, I did struggle with that second boss fight compared to like his first one, because his first one was super easy and that second one was kind of hard because like he was moving so goddamn fast, and I was like, god damn, I was like, why is he moving this goddamn fast? Now when it comes to the final boss fight of the subordinates with the scissor man and scissor woman, now when it comes to the scissor woman, her boss fight should be super easy, but technically it's really not because she teleports every fucking where. Like she teleports way too much, and also she has a wind attack that can attack you too, so like hers is actually very hard. It's very hard to like get off like a powerful arrow on her. The only time you really can is like when she's running up to you, charging at you. That's the only time you can really hit her. Yes, you can hit her I think with a repel arrow, and I think that takes off all her health, but for the most part it is a pretty tricky boss fight because she teleports everywhere. And one of the other things that can suck about this boss fight is that you can't lock on to her because like she teleports everywhere, and most of the time you can't lock on. Even if she's doing the wind thing, you can't lock on. The only time you can lock on is when she's running at you, so hers can be very tricky. Now when it comes to the scissor man or Ralph, his is not really that hard because you can get him stuck pretty easily like with fully charged arrows, but at the same time he does have an attack where like swords pop all the way up. It kind of reminds me of like an attack from like Bleach, one of the people from Bleach's Bankai. I can't remember which one. That's kind of what his attack kind of reminds me of, but yeah, it's the one where the swords pop up all the way. But if you're standing in the middle, for the most part them swords won't hit you, especially if you're standing far away. But his really isn't that hard, and it's pretty easy to beat him. It's just really Jemima, her boss fight is really the one that's pretty hard because of like all the teleporting that she does, even though she has a little bit of health though. Now we have to talk about the worst boss fight in this game. The worst boss fight in this game, and arguably one of the worst boss fights in like almost any survival horror game, because this boss fight has so much RNG that it sucks. Because we're fighting Lord Boros, and it sucks so goddamn bad. Because the thing is, his boss fight shouldn't be that hard, but especially because if you played this game, you know how all the boss fights have been, but this one is so vastly different because there's so many times that can screw you up. Because essentially, when it comes to Lord Boros, he shoots out these purple orbs, and the thing is, them orbs can get you stuck because they're basically the same as like the arrows you can shoot that can get people stuck. That's essentially what he does, and if you get hit with 3 of those, just know it's game over, and you have this skeleton that comes out through the sky and it sticks his tongue down or whatever, and you die, and that can become very annoying. And also, he has this attack where like this weird like red goo comes and he can leave you stuck in place, and also he can basically hit you with his sword, and if he hits you with the sword, then you get this stupid ass move where somehow he can still grab you. He basically grabs you and sucks like all your HP, like a certain amount of it, and then just replenishes his. And the thing about that one is it becomes very annoying because let's say you get hit with a sword, but you get up and you're running away from him. It doesn't really matter how far you're away, somehow he's still able to grab you, and it makes no goddamn sense. But yeah, the RNG in this fight can get very annoying. Thing is, you have repel arrows and binding arrows, but most of the time it's hard to even get those to work because you essentially have to get off 2 of your strong big attacks that come off with the arrows, because you have to get those off because you have to get him stuck with 3 of those that you can hit that big attack on him and have it rain down. But the thing is, it still sucks because you can get so much RNG in there that can get you, either you're going to get stuck by one of them orbs, like one of the times you're trying to dodge it. Yes, you can dodge them by basically pressing circle and you duck down, or you can also like move a little bit to the left or the right or whatever, wherever it's coming, you can dodge it, because most of the time if you just move a little bit you can dodge it that way and still charge up an arrow. But at the same time it can be very annoying because sometimes you might misjudge it, because sometimes them orbs can still hit you, or you have the thing when the red goo is appearing, you just happen to get stuck in them, so it can just become very annoying. And trust me, you can waste so much time doing this, because the first time I ever played this game I wasted so much goddamn time, and especially when I played it recently, because I played it recently like last year, and I took a whole goddamn hour to beat this boss fight, and it was so goddamn annoying. And even on the second playthroughs I did of this game to get all this footage, it was so goddamn annoying because it just sucks. So yeah, that's the one thing I'll just say. This boss fight just sucks because of how hard it can be, especially because of how easy all the other subordinates were. They made this final boss fight so goddamn hard, and it makes no goddamn sense why they made it this hard compared to all the other ones. Because you go from all them other boss fights, you're just like, oh yeah, this game's not that hard, and then the difficulty gets spiked very, very hard with this boss fight that just sucks. It's dog shit. Now, one of the things I always did love about this series is how unique the areas are when it comes to the different levels that we're in, especially for a survival horror game. We're in a lot of places that you usually are not in a lot of different survival horror games, or they take a different take. Yes, there is a sewer level in here, but the sewer level is vastly different than other survival horror games. So that's one of the things I do think about that. And then also when it comes to the hospital section is pretty short, but it is kind of vastly different than a few other ones, but we can talk about them. So now the first level takes place in London, 1940, and it's in a concert hall. It's a pretty cool place for a survival horror game to take place in, especially for a first level, because it's basically a theater, and we even get to walk on top too. So it was just pretty cool that we get to be in a theater because we're running through, like, you know, the seats and all that, like the upper level and the lower level. Now I will say the second level, which is not really nothing crazy-ish, because one, we're in a house, and then we're in a factory, and then we're in a sewer. For the most part, it's not really nothing too crazy for the most part, but like it has pretty cool ideas, I guess, like the way we're traveling through it, and the way how we even get to the factory is like through a fan, and then how we even get to the sewer is just a door right there. So I guess for the most part, it's a cool area. Now when it comes to the third level, it takes place in a sewer, and one of the things I like about this sewer that's kind of different than a lot of other sewers is we're going through between like all these different levels in the basement. You have the first floor, the second floor, and third, and we're just going through all these different levels that we can eventually get to the exit, and you have to like unlock all these different things with puzzles and all that and find different items. So that's one of the things I like about this sewer is like we're basically just going on elevator and then coming out, then elevator and coming out. So it's a little bit different than a lot of other survival horror games where usually when you get a sewer level, you're just like one straight sewer level that has like other places you need to go. Where this one, we're kind of just like traveling between these floors, and you have to keep traveling between them to unlock certain areas. So that's one of the things I like about that. Now when it comes to the fourth area in this game, it takes place at a hospital, and it kind of takes its own take on like Silent Hill's Otherworld, mainly because in this one you have Alyssa basically going through a mirror, and it's basically just a parallel world of like the regular side we were on. It has like some of the same stuff, is just flipped around. So even though we're only in the hospital for a super short time, I thought it was pretty cool that they took like kind of just their own take on like Silent Hill's Otherworld. So I kind of like that one. When it comes to the last area in this game, it's the castle slash clock tower area, and it does look pretty cool, especially like when you go inside, you have all these big giant statues, and then you have the big giant staircase that goes up all the way to the clock tower. So I thought that was pretty cool. Some of the areas in there are pretty unique, especially like some of the areas you have to run away from the scissor men and all that, and you have that one hallway with all the knights, which is pretty cool. So there's a lot of cool areas in the castle for the most part, especially like areas that you have to like find certain pieces to unlock stuff. Like when it comes to the one little area where you have to touch the candle to basically turn it, and it turns off like all the water pouring out of them two statues, and then you have to put like the, you know, the A and the N like crest on those. So for the most part, I do enjoy the castle. Now when it comes to the atmosphere of this game, the atmosphere of this game is phenomenal. I love the music. A lot of the music fits the game amazingly, especially the music that each subordinate gets. It actually makes it nerve-wracking, and when you hear subordinates music, it can become very stressful because you're just worried and freaking out because you hear that music. So that's one of the fitting things for the music. Another thing along that lines is the panic mode. When that panic meter fills all the way up, it can become so goddamn stressful, and then you have that crazy music that's happening as Alyssa's freaking out. It looks like she's stumbling and mumbling. It honestly feels like you're drunk because the whole screen is tripping out too. So that's one of the things that just feels amazing with that scene, because it just fits it so amazing, especially for the panic meter, because it just lets you know, you're like, oh shit, I'm freaking out, I need to get off this, I need to pop some lavender water or something that my panic meter can go down. The music just fits it perfectly, I will say. So one of the other things this game does introduce that's pretty cool, so you have other enemies in this game besides the subordinates. It's spirits. Like there's spirits that like need to pass away, and the thing is, you have to find them certain items, and once you find these items for them, they basically pass away. Then they'll leave you something, either key items, or they'll leave you like a lavender water, a sigil, or they leave you like an invisibility band. So like they leave you certain type of items, or it's key items for the most part, but like it's a cool little thing to do because it gives you something extra to do in the game when it comes to just finding certain items, and you take it back to this certain spirits. And most of the time the item is literally super close to the spirit anyway. Most of the time, there are some times when you have to go out of your way to actually find them, but for the most part, a lot of them are just super close to the stuff anyway. So I thought that was really cool that they added the spirits in the game. Now when it comes to the gameplay in this game, it is vastly different than a lot of other survival horror games at the time, because one, this is not tank controls. You're using your analogs and you're controlling it, and you're running with Alyssa. Yes, you have the panic meter meter, which we will talk about in a little bit because that's its own thing at all. One of the other gameplay features in here is the holy water. Now the holy water is used to break seals. You basically use it to splash spirits or the subordinates to essentially stop them that you can get away, and that's kind of what the whole purpose of this is, besides of course, you know, when you get in a boss fight the whole bottle turns into, you know, a bow and all that. But for the most part, that's really what those are used for, along with like portals too, because there are certain portals that you have to throw holy water on that you can go to different places. So there's that for the most part. But holy water is just a cool little feature that you can kind of use to protect yourself, seeing that, like, you know, this game doesn't really have any way for you to fight back against the characters besides in the boss fight, because you have the subordinates that are running after you and you have to get away or hide. Also, there are times you have to walk across planks, and sometimes those can be hit or miss because you can fall and bust your shit with them. One of the other features that is interesting they did in this game is that there is a lot of crawling in this game, and especially for a teenage girl that is wearing something very short, and especially because there's certain outfits in this game that I'll say it's like, why did they make this crawling when this is a 15-year-old girl? Because there's a lot of crawling in this game, and especially because there's a certain outfit that I'll talk about later that is just like, why did they make it that you can crawl this much? So yeah, there's a lot of crawling, and it's very questionable, I will say, especially for a 15-year-old girl, and you see she's wearing a skirt and other type of outfits, and you're just wondering like, why did they sexualize this? Because especially when we get to the other costumes, we're talking about the costumes you unlock. There's some very questionable costumes that they unlock for this little girl, I will say though. But yes, that's one of the other features that does happen here a lot, is that you have to crawl a lot, because there's a lot of random places that you just have to crawl under to grab something or do something. Now when it comes to the panic meters and panic mode, just know when you're in panic mode, just know you're running like a bumbling fool the whole time, because like you're tripping out and you're about to trip and fall, and even Alyssa does stop at certain times, and that can cause the subordinate to catch up and even hit you, and then your panic meter is going to go up again. Yes, there are ways to make your panic meter go down, that is with the lavender water, but at the same time you're just running around like a bumbling fool, and sometimes there's a lot of stupid things in this game that can make your panic meter go up. It's like, essentially, of course, if like subordinate touches you, that makes sense that your panic meter would go up, but like if they miss and they're in your general area, somehow that still makes your panic meter go up, and that makes no goddamn sense. It's like, dog, how is this subordinate missing and I'm juking and dodging them still count for my panic meter? That's one of the flaws of this game that I'll say that's very stupid. It's like, dog, I literally just dodged that. How is that still gonna make my panic meter go up? And just know, sometimes they can get very annoying, especially if you're running away and a subordinate just keeps missing and missing, but they're super close to you, and then your panic meter goes up, and now you got to deal with that BS. And sometimes when you use the lavender water, it takes too long, you know, to go all the way down. So next thing you know, you're still in the panic mode. You're doing the animation where you stop, and next thing you know, a stupid subordinate comes and hits you. So now your panic mode is all the way up. So yeah, it can get very annoying, because most of the time you can just use lavender water and it'll make your panic meter go all the way down for the most part, because you get a lot of lavender water in this game, more than you ever need, honestly though. And of course, with this being a clock tower game, of course you're going to be able to hide from the subordinates. And one of the crazy things that can happen in this game when you hide is, like, if a subordinate sees you as you're hiding, it can come to that locker or wherever else you're hiding, and it can basically kill you. So that's one of the things that can happen. But also we have evade points, which are like, you'll see like little glowing things by object. You basically go there and there's a cutscene where you basically take out the enemy for a certain amount of time. It's usually super short, but for the most part you just take it out for a little bit. That way you can like do something, because especially in the first level there's like multiple different times you can do that. Going into like Shorty's room, you can do that, or there's like a certain one like where we can throw like a vase and other things. So like it's usually just random funny scenes that happen here, because most of the time the evade points are pretty funny in here, because like they're just stupid too. A lot of them just feel like some Looney Tunes type of action. Is pretty funny though. But I will say there are some times where you can get jumped, especially in the hospital. So like you'll go to run from the enemy and you're running the stall, but like when it comes to the scissor man or woman, they will be waiting outside of that stall, and then they will scare you, and then next thing you know, your panic meter is gonna go up. So there are times like that that can piss you off though. And of course, with this not being like your standard survival horror game where, you know, you're fighting the enemy and you pick up weapons and other stuff like that, this one you really only get 3 items. And of course, you know, you get all the key items too, but you really only get 3 items. The first item that you find throughout the game is lavender water. Lavender water is essentially used to basically make your panic meter go all the way down. There is one time you have to give one of the spirits of lavender water, but for the most part that's really all this is used for. Another thing you get is an invisibility band, which allows you to be invisible only for a short time. This one has its uses. There's certain areas where a subordinate can basically scare you, and like it makes your panic meter go all the way up, but if you pop a invisibility band, you essentially can like hide from them. So there are certain areas, and that's where that one can become useful. Or if there's like a subordinate that's super close to you while you're doing a puzzle, you can essentially pop an invisibility band. I will say there is one area where the invisibility bands are actually needed for, and that is the area where you have the knights, because they come alive, and like you have one that is like swinging the axe down and one that's swinging it to the side, and just know it can become very annoying because they can take you out. But if you have an invisibility band on, you basically can run through those and get down the elevators. Now the last thing we get is this one type of stone that we get, and it essentially makes it like when you get hit, you basically are still able to survive. And you get these a lot throughout the game. So like whenever a subordinate hits you, you're able to basically still survive, because whenever a subordinate does hit you, it can kill you if you don't have one of these stones. But those are just cool little things that you can have that can protect yourself against a subordinate, seeing that this game, you know, doesn't really have anything besides holy water, and when you do a boss fight, that can really hurt the subordinates. Now after you beat this game, it unlocks a second playthrough, and in that second playthrough you get a key where you unlock 4 new outfits that you can wear throughout the game. But in the Japanese version, you get 3 extra costumes. So yeah, after beating the game, you unlock all these different costumes. But I will say there's a lot of questionable costumes, especially with this being a 15-year-old girl. A lot of questionable costumes. You have one that's a whole leather outfit. You have one where you're wearing a cowgirl outfit and she has like an opening jacket right here, and then you have a bra right there, and then she wears a hat. You have her basically regular like schoolgirl outfit that we wear throughout the game, and of course they gave us the outfit where you essentially fight against the boss at the end of the game. You have that outfit. But there is one outfit we must talk about, because it's a cool design until you realize, oh, something's way too short. And that is basically the armor outfit that we get. That outfit is way too goddamn short, and that's the one where I say when you get the crawling, it's like, why did they add all this crawling in this game for this little ass girl? Because in that outfit, you essentially see her underwear and everything and all that, and it's just like, why? It's like, you did not need to make this armor that goddamn short. So yeah, there's a lot of questionable things about this, because like, in my opinion, this feels like some anime BS. Because if you watch a lot of anime, you know there's a lot of BS like this where they're always sexualizing minors and little girls and other things like that. That's kind of one of the more disappointing things. It's like, why did you sexualize her? But yeah, it just makes you question, like, what was Capcom thinking? It's like, it's different when you have characters in Resident Evil that are adults, like Jill in Resident Evil 3, that they gave her a lot of different outfits. But it's like, when it's a little girl like this, it's like, why? Because I know even Hunting Ground had like problems because people were complaining about that being sexualized back in the day for Hunting Ground. But I was like, dog, Fiona is an adult. That's vastly different. Alyssa is a 15-year-old girl. They did not need to add all these extra costumes that are really sexualizing her. But it's really just mainly 3 costumes that are like that. I'll say it's the cowgirl one in a way, mainly because you have the opening right here, but it's not as bad as the other ones. Then you have the whole leather outfit, which is like, why would a 15-year-old ever be wearing that? And then it's like, dog, why did you make the armor outfit so goddamn short? But when it comes to like the other costumes that you can see in the Japanese versions, those ones aren't that bad, because one, you get a Santa Claus costume. You also get some other school uniforms. So those ones aren't that bad. It's really just those 3 are just very questionable. It's just like, why did they include those? And also when it comes to like beating the game, one of the other things is on the second playthrough, this kind of just essentially unlocks hard mode, mainly because some of the enemies have new weapons and they're also faster. And you can tell, especially like when you're running from them, like through the regular game and in their boss fights, they're also faster. And when it comes to the final boss, he's kind of like way harder, because there's certain times when he'll shoot out like a whole bunch of like the orbs, because that's one of the things that can happen in here is he can shoot out multiple different orbs, along with doing the one goo attack that can basically expand like super far too. But that's some of the stuff that you unlock once you beat the game. But for the most part, this game really doesn't have that much replayability like after you beat it, unless you really want to do a second playthrough in like a different costume. Besides that, you don't really unlock stuff like that, because one, you do unlock the theater where you can just like watch cutscenes and all that, but there's not really anything extra that they add to this game that makes you want to like replay it, because there's not even like alternate endings that are in here, because there's none of that at all. It's just one straight ending. So I will say that's one of the more disappointing things, that there's not really anything extra to do after you beat the game besides, you know, just playing on a hard mode and then playing in different costumes and then fighting these enemies that are, you know, they're just a little bit faster. Now with the first Clock Tower game being released on modern consoles later this year, I'm really hoping that Clock Tower 3 can get the same treatment at some point, because I feel like this is a game a lot of people should play, because one, it's a game that costs a lot of money for the most part. It just kind of depends on where you go, because I got mine, because this is not my original copy I had when I was younger. This is a different copy. I got this one actually for free, mainly because I had in-store credit, but the place I went to, they were selling it for $60, and I mean, that's vastly different than a lot of other places, because some places sell this game for $80 plus. But for the most part, like I said, it's an expensive game to get, so a lot of people, you know, you can't play this game unless you drop some bread to actually get this game. That's the only way you would play this like on your PS2 physically or PS3, whatever you got. But But when it comes to other people, they have to play this through emulation, and that's how a lot of people do. But like, I really hope this game can get the same treatment as Clock Tower. I hope a lot of people buy Clock Tower 1 to show them that, like, yo, people want Clock Tower again, because this is a series that needs to come back. It just sucks that this game didn't sell that well. If this game would have came out a little bit later, like maybe the mid 2000s or maybe like early 2010s, I feel like Clock Tower 3 would have sold really well, especially because you look at games like Outlast and it has like you're running away from an enemy. I feel like that this game would have fit perfectly around there. I just feel like this came out way too early. That's what I kind of feel like. It just came out way too early. If it would have came out a little bit later, we probably could have had more to the Clock Tower franchise, but sadly, you know, we never got anything else. But I really hope that this game can come to modern consoles, that other people can play this game, because a lot of people need to at least experience Clock Tower 3, because yes, Clock Tower 3 might not be the best survival horror game, but at the same time, it's one that's unique enough, and it's very silly, and it's just a pretty fun game, especially for a survival horror game, because one, it's not super scary, and you won't really be scared that much. Yes, there are some moments you might be scared, but for the most part, it's not that scary, and the story is actually pretty interesting, even though I will say, you know, you have the grandfather that wants to be one with his grandchild, which is very wild, but for the most part, it is a pretty interesting story though. I'll always love Clock Tower 3, even though it's a very wacky and silly game.